I think you've made a mistake. Get out of this lounge right now, or you'll regret it. Hands behind your back. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. Get him on the ground.
A black man walked into the Flight Force's premium lounge at a major international airport, tapped his military benefits card at the scanner, was waved through by the desk attendant, and settled into a leather chair facing the runway windows. 6 minutes later, a white businessman in a press suit walked to the front desk and told the manager he didn't feel comfortable. The manager didn't check the system. He didn't verify the scan. He didn't ask a single question about the man by the window. He picked up the phone and called security. What none of them knew, not the businessman, not the manager, not the officer who would answer that call and make the worst decision of his 11-year career, was who that man actually was. Sergeant Marcus Thorne, United States Army, Special Forces, 14 years of service, 3 classified combat deployments. A man trained to remain still while the world collapsed around him. He had been in that chair for 6 minutes. He would be on that floor in 20. And every single person in that lounge would have their phone out to film it. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, let me know in the comment where you're watching from tonight. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, because what unfolds over the next several minutes will leave you speechless. Trust me, you wouldn't want to miss it. Julian Mercer had been a Platinum Elite member of the Flight Force's lounge network for 9 consecutive years. He knew the Wi-Fi password before the desk attendants changed it each month. He knew which chairs caught the afternoon light and which ones sat in the dead zone of the air conditioning. He knew the bartender's name, Derek, and Derek knew his order. Blue Light Bourbon, 2 fingers, 1 cube. No menu required. This was his space the way that certain spaces belong to certain people, not through ownership, but through repetition, through the quiet accumulation of 1,000 unchallenged entries. He had never once been asked to prove he belonged here. The thought had never occurred to him that he might need to. He was on his 2nd bourbon when Marcus Thorne walked in. There was nothing remarkable about the entrance. No disruption, no raised voice, no scene of any kind. Thorne moved the way he always moved, economically, without waste, and found a chair by the window 3 seats down from Julian's. He set his duffel bag on the floor beside him. He ordered water from the passing attendant. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and was still. That was all. That was the entirety of it. And yet something shifted in Julian Mercer the moment that stillness settled into the room. It was not a thought, exactly. It was not something he would ever be able to articulate in a deposition or explain to his wife or justify to himself at 3 in the morning when the settlement figure appeared in the news and his name appeared beside it. It was more primitive than thought. It was the particular discomfort of a man who has spent 47 years moving through the world without friction, suddenly feeling the grain of something that shouldn't be there. He looked at Thorne. Civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain long-sleeve shirt, worn boots. No briefcase, no laptop, no visible reason to be here that Julian could immediately categorize and file away and stop thinking about. Just a man in a chair by a window, eyes closed, breathing slowly. Julian took a sip of his bourbon and looked away. He looked back. He finished his bourbon. He was not a bigot. He would have told you that. He had a black colleague at the firm he genuinely respected. He had voted, twice, for a candidate he considered progressive. He did not use certain words, had never used them, winced when others did. He was not that kind of man. What he was, though, what 9 years of Platinum Elite membership and first-class upgrades and a salary that placed him in the top 4% of earners in the country had made him, was a man who had confused comfort with entitlement so completely that he could no longer tell the difference between a threat and an inconvenience. He walked to the front desk. He didn't lead with race. He never would. That's not how it works. And Julian Mercer was not a stupid man. What he said, in the measured, reasonable tone of someone who manages junior partners and sits on homeowners association boards, was that he wanted to flag a concern, that there was a gentleman by the window he didn't recognize, that he'd been coming to this lounge for 9 years, and he prided himself on being observant, and something just fell off. He used the word uncomfortable twice. He used the phrase, just want to make sure everything's in order once. He smiled when he said it. Not cruelly, not with any conscious malice, just the reflexive, collaborative smile of a man who expects the person behind the desk to handle the thing he has identified as a problem. Elias Sterling, the lounge manager, listened. He nodded. He glanced toward the window. Julian leaned in slightly and said, I just think it's worth checking. That was the whole of it. No slur. No accusation. No explicit demand. Just 9 years of platinum membership and 2 empty bourbon glasses and 4 words doing more work than Julian would ever acknowledge they were doing. He walked back to his chair feeling, if he felt anything at all, the mild satisfaction of a man who has completed a minor administrative task. He picked up his phone. He checked his email. He did not look at Thorne again. He didn't need to. He had delegated. Across the lounge, Marcus Thorne had not moved. His eyes were still closed. His breathing was still slow. He had survived 9 months in environments where the wrong posture could end your life, where stillness was not passivity but strategy, where the ability to remain calm inside a deteriorating situation was the difference between coming home and not coming home. He was exhausted in a way that went past sleep, past rest, into something structural, a tiredness that lived in the bones. He was thinking about his daughter, the sign she'd made last time, glitter letters on a piece of poster board. Daddy, 7 years old, and she'd stayed up past her bedtime to finish the glitter. He was thinking about that when Elias Sterling picked up the desk phone. He was thinking about that when Sterling dialed security. He was still thinking about it when the door to the lounge opened and Officer Garrett Vance walked in. Elias Sterling had held the lounge manager position for 6 years, and in those 6 years, he had built something he was quietly proud of, a reputation for never letting anything become a situation. That was the word his regional director used in quarterly reviews. Situations. The goal was the prevention of them. Elias Sterling was, by that single metric, excellent at his job. He was 39 years old. He had a daughter in middle school, a mortgage that was manageable if nothing unexpected happened, and a performance review coming up in 3 weeks that he very much needed to go well. He was not a cruel man. He was not, he would have insisted, a prejudiced one. He was simply a man who had learned, through 6 years of managing the competing needs of premium travelers, that the fastest way to end a disruption was to remove its source, and that the guest most likely to escalate a complaint to a regional director was almost never the quiet man by the window. He approached Thorne the way he approached every delicate conversation, with a practiced smile and language carefully selected to sound like policy rather than judgment. He was sorry to disturb him. There had been a concern raised. Standard procedure required him to verify membership for all lounge guests. He hoped he paused, an invitation, understood. Thorne opened his eyes. He looked at Sterling for a moment without expression, the way a man looks at something he has already assessed and categorized. Then he reached into his jacket, produced his military cat card, and placed it on the armrest between them. Sterling looked at the card without picking it up. He recognized it. Or rather, he recognized that it was some kind of official identification, green-bordered, government-issued, bearing a photograph that was unmistakably the man in front of him. He did not know precisely what a cat card authorized. He did not know the specific terms of the airport's military benefits partnership, which had been announced with considerable fanfare 18 months earlier, and which he had been briefed on in a 15-minute meeting he had not taken notes in. What he knew, standing in front of that chair, was that picking up that card and walking it to the desk and running it through the system would take approximately 30 seconds and would end this entirely. He also knew that Julia Mercer was watching from across the lounge. He didn't look. He didn't need to. He could feel it, the particular quality of attention from a man accustomed to being responded to, waiting to see whether his concern had been taken seriously. 9 years of platinum elite. The kind of member who knew the regional director's first name. The kind of member who, if he felt his comfort had been dismissed in favor of a stranger's credentials, would find a way to make that feeling known. Sterling made the calculation in the time it took to draw a breath. He told Thorne that the card, unfortunately, was not in the system he had access to at the desk. He told him that without a verified lounge membership number or a same-day, first-class boarding pass, he wasn't able to confirm eligibility. He used the word protocol twice. He kept his voice pleasant throughout. He was, he told himself, simply doing his job. Thorne looked at him with an expression that Sterling would think about for a long time afterward. Not anger, not surprise, but something quieter and more unsettling than either. Recognition. The look of a man who has encountered this particular wall before and knows exactly what it is made of, regardless of what it is being called. Thorne said, "It's a federal military ID. It covers lounge access under the Armed Forces Benefits Partnership. You can call the membership line to verify. Sterling said he understood, but without system confirmation, his hands were tied. Thorne said, "My hands are not tied. I have a valid credential and a legal right to be in this space." He said it without raising his voice, without shifting in his seat, without anything that could be described by any reasonable person as aggression. And that composure, that absolute, immovable composure, did something to Elias Sterling that he would never fully admit. It made him feel that he was losing. Not an argument, not a policy dispute, but something more fundamental. A test of authority that he had initiated and could not now back down from without cost. He told Thorne he would need to ask him to wait at the desk while he sorted it out. Thorne did not move. Sterling returned to the desk. He stood there for a moment, the cat card still in his hand. Thorne had pressed it into his palm as he turned away, quietly, without a word. And he looked at the membership verification line printed on the laminated card behind the counter. And he looked at the regional director's number saved in his phone. And he looked at Julian Mercer, who had refilled his bourbon and was no longer pretending not to watch. He set the cat card on the desk. He picked up the phone. He dialed airport security. Garrett Vance had a theory about airport assignments that he shared with anyone who would listen. They were for cops who had lost their edge. Soft postings for men who'd gone careful. He had not requested this assignment. He had been moved here 14 months ago following a use of force review that his union rep had successfully characterized as a paperwork issue, and he carried the indignity of it the way some men carry old injuries, constantly, and with a particular bitterness reserved for anyone he felt had put him there. He was 44 years old, broad through the shoulders, thick in the jaw, with the physical confidence of a man who had spent 11 years learning that his body, in most situations, was the last word in an argument. He had worked precincts where that was simply true, where speed and volume and the willingness to close distance fast meant that most situations resolved before anyone had time to think carefully about them. He had not, in 11 years, developed the habit of thinking carefully about situations. He had developed the habit of ending them. He got the call from dispatch at 4:47 in the afternoon. Lounge manager requesting assistance. Guest refusing to vacate. He was through the door in under 3 minutes. He read the room the way he always read rooms. Fast, certain, already writing the report in his head before he'd crossed the threshold. Manager behind the desk, looking relieved to see him. Businessman near the bar, watching. And by the window, the man in question, black, civilian clothes, seated, alone. Vance had the story before he reached him. What he did not have, what he had never once considered acquiring, was any curiosity about whether the story was wrong. He told Thorne to stand up. Not asked. Told. The voice he used was the one designed to establish, immediately and without ambiguity, who held authority in the conversation. Thorne looked up at him. Then, slowly, with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who has assessed a threat and classified it, he reached into his jacket and extended his cat card. Vance didn't take it. He told Thorne again to stand up. Sir. The sir tacked on like punctuation, clipped and performative, a courtesy drained entirely of courtesy. Thorne said, I have a valid military ID. I'm legally authorized to be in this lounge. I'm not trespassing, and I'm not causing a disturbance. He said it the way he said everything, level, unhurried, each word placed with precision. His eyes did not drop. His hands did not shake. The card remained extended, steady between them. And something happened in Garrett Vance that had nothing to do with law enforcement and everything to do with the 11 years he'd spent in rooms where that kind of stillness didn't exist, where people flinched, where they apologized reflexively, moved quickly, made themselves smaller, where authority, once displayed, was confirmed by the immediate adjustment of everyone around it. Thorne did not adjust. Thorne did not perform the expected response. And the absence of that performance landed in Vance not as information, but as provocation. He reached for Thorne's arm. Thorne said, clearly and audibly, I am not resisting. I am not a threat. I am a United States Army sergeant, and that is my federal military ID. He said it for the room. He said it for the phones that had, in the past 40 seconds, risen from pockets and purses across the lounge with the quiet, collective instinct of people who recognize that they are witnessing something that needs to be witnessed. He said it because he had understood, from the moment Elias Sterling walked away from his chair, that his conduct was the only thing he controlled, and he intended to control it completely. Vance yanked him forward by the arm and took him to the floor. It happened fast. The efficient brutality of someone who has done this many times in rooms where no one was watching. Thorne's chest hit the carpet. His arm was pulled behind his back. Vance's knee found his spine, and the cat card, which Thorne had been holding until the moment of impact, skipped across the carpet and came to rest 18 inches from his outstretched hand. Face up, the Eagle and Special Forces insignia, catching the lounge lighting with perfect, terrible clarity. The room did not react with noise. That was the thing that would stay with people afterward, the silence. Not the silence of indifference, but the silence of people watching something they cannot stop and cannot look away from, their phones recording, their bodies frozen, their faces holding the particular expression of witnesses who know, in real time, that they are watching a mistake so catastrophic it will have consequences none of them can yet measure. Vance clicked the cuffs on. He was breathing hard. Thorne was not. Thorne lay still on the carpet of the Flight Forces premium lounge, his cheek against the floor, his hands bound behind him, his military ID 6 inches out of reach. And he said nothing. He did not struggle. He did not plead. He simply waited, with the patience of a man who has learned that some battles are not fought in the moment they begin. 14 phones were recording. The video was already 17 seconds long. The first upload went live at 5:03 p.m. A woman in a gray blazer, later identified as a procurement director on her way to a connecting flight, had been seated 12 feet from the incident and had filmed the final 22 seconds on her phone without fully understanding why, operating on the same instinct that makes people slow down in accidents. She posted it without caption. Just a video. Vance's knee. Thorne's stillness. The card on the carpet. By 5:30 it had been shared 400 times. By 7 o'clock, 400 had become 40,000, and the caption had been written for her. Not by her, but by the accumulated weight of everyone who had watched it and felt something shift in their chest and needed to put language to it. Veterans posted it with single sentences. This man served. Look at the card on the floor. I did 3 tours, and this is what we come home to. Active duty personnel shared it through channels their commands would later ask them to explain. A retired master sergeant with a modest following posted it alongside a photograph of his own CAC card and wrote 4 words that were retweeted 90,000 times before midnight. That could be me. The military community did not respond with chaos. It responded with the particular organized fury of people who understand chain of command, who know that the most effective pressure is applied not through noise, but through the right calls to the right offices. Congressional liaisons began receiving emails. Veterans advocacy organizations issued statements before 9 p.m. 2 U.S. senators with seats on the Armed Services Committee were tagged in posts by constituents and had their communications directors drafting responses within the hour. The apparatus of institutional attention, once it began turning, turned with purpose. By 10 p.m. the view count had cleared 8 million. By midnight it was 20. By the time the morning news cycle began assembling itself, the number was climbing past 30, and the story had acquired the specific momentum of something that cannot be managed, only survived. The journalists arrived at the facts in layers. The first layer was Vance himself. His disciplinary record took less than 40 minutes to obtain. 3 use-of-force complaints in 11 years. Each one reviewed. Each one closed without formal action. The paper trail of a pattern that had never been called a pattern because no one had yet been sufficiently motivated to draw the line connecting the points. The second layer was the airport's own incident logs, which a reporter obtained through a public records request filed at 7 a.m. and answered, under mounting pressure, by early afternoon. What those logs showed, what transformed a story from an outrage into an indictment, was that Elias Sterling had submitted security requests regarding lounge guests on 2 prior occasions in the preceding 8 months. Both guests had been black. Both had possessed valid credentials. Neither incident had resulted in formal discipline. 3 incidents. 3 black men. 0 consequences until now. The phrase pattern of behavior appeared in print for the first time at 2:17 p.m. By 3 o'clock it was in every headline. Inside the airport's administrative offices, the legal team had convened an emergency session before noon. They had watched the view count the way meteorologists watch a pressure system, tracking it, modeling it, understanding that at a certain point the question shifts from whether damage will occur to how much. They were past that point by mid-morning. The settlement conversation did not begin with the question of liability. Liability was no longer a question. It began with the question of number. What figure, offered quickly and without protracted litigation, might represent the most efficient path through a situation that was deteriorating by the hour? They did not contact Thorne's attorney that afternoon. Thorne did not yet have an attorney, but they began drafting the framework of an offer, because the alternative was watching the view count reach 50 million before the week was out, and the number attached to 50 million witnesses was a number none of them wanted to say out loud. What none of the legal team's calculations accounted for, what no algorithm for reputational damage could fully measure, was a particular quality of Thorne's conduct in the video. He had not struggled. He had not shouted. He had not given them a single second of footage that could be reframed, recontextualized, or used to distribute responsibility. He had announced himself clearly, extended his credentials, and then, when none of it was enough, he had gone still. The stillness of a man with nothing to hide and nowhere to hide from. The stillness of someone who had understood, in the moment it mattered, that the most powerful thing he could do was absolutely nothing. That stillness was what 42 million people had watched. Not an altercation, not a confrontation between two people whose conduct was ambiguous. Just a man on a floor, a card on a carpet, and a knee on a back. 17 seconds that required no narration, no context, no argument. They spoke entirely for themselves. 400 miles away, Marcus Thorne sat in a different terminal, waiting for his connecting flight, his phone off, knowing none of this. Thinking about glitter letters on a poster board. Thinking about 6 hours becoming 5 becoming 4. Thinking about the arrivals gate. He had done his part. The truth was handling the rest. The consequences did not arrive with drama. That is the thing worth understanding. There was no single moment of reckoning, no public confrontation, no scene in which anyone looked anyone else in the eye and accounted for what they had done. It happened the way most institutional damage happens. Quietly, administratively, in the language of HR memos and legal correspondence and unanswered calls, each person discovering the cost of their choices alone, in private, without an audience. Julia Mercer's name surfaced on the third day. A woman who had been in the lounge recognized him from the background of a wider-angle video and posted the connection on a professional networking platform with his employer tagged. The company's communications team spent approximately 4 hours deciding how to respond before concluding that the only response available to them was distance. His corporate travel account was suspended pending review. The review was brief. He was removed from the preferred client program quietly, without announcement, the way organizations remove things they do not wish to be associated with. Not with condemnation, just absence. His face, as the Post had noted, was everywhere now. It would remain searchable for the rest of his professional life, attached to his name in the particular permanent way of things that live on servers rather than in newspapers. He had not spoken publicly. He had retained counsel. Counsel had advised silence. The silence, under the circumstances, was its own kind of statement. Elias Sterling was terminated on the second day. The letter cited a failure to follow verification protocols and a pattern of conduct inconsistent with company values. It did not use the word racism. It did not need to. The termination was swift and the severance was structured in a way designed to preclude wrongful dismissal claims, which told Sterling everything he needed to know about how thoroughly the legal team had assessed his position. He cleaned out his desk on a Tuesday morning when the lounge was quiet. The regional director did not come to see him off. Sterling had spent 6 years ensuring that nothing became a situation. In the end, he had become one himself, a case study in the particular institutional cowardice of choosing comfort over process, and the price of that choice when the process, ignored, comes back through a lawyer. Garrett Vance was stripped of his badge 11 days after the incident, following an accelerated internal affairs review that his union rep later called unprecedented in its speed. The 3 prior use of force complaints, each one previously closed without consequence, were reopened as part of the investigation and incorporated into the findings. He was criminally charged with assault under color of authority, a federal charge, carrying consequences substantially more serious than anything his union could negotiate around. He was named personally in the civil suit, alongside the airport authority and the lounge management company, which meant that the settlement, when it came, would follow him in ways that institutional payouts typically do not. His badge, his pension, his 11 years, all of it unwound by 15 seconds of conduct he had spent a career believing no one would ever hold him accountable for, in a room full of people he had not noticed were watching. The airport settled for $3.4 million. The agreement included mandatory retraining for all security personnel, a formal review of the lounge's guest verification procedures, and the terms of a federal civil rights audit that would examine a broad pattern of conduct across the facility. The settlement was reached without Thorne ever sitting for a deposition. There was nothing to depose him about that the video did not already show more clearly than any testimony could. His attorney released a single statement. It was 4 sentences long. It noted that Sergeant Thorne had presented valid federal credentials, had not resisted, had not raised his voice, and had been physically assaulted in a public space in front of dozens of witnesses. It expressed satisfaction that the matter had been resolved. It did not express surprise that it had needed resolving. It did not ask for anything further from anyone. Marcus Thorne did not give interviews. He did not appear on morning programs or accept the speaking invitations that arrived through his attorney's office in the weeks following the settlement. He had said what he needed to say on the floor of that lounge, in the moment it mattered, to an audience of 14 phones and 42 million strangers. He did not feel the need to say it again. What he felt, the only thing that had mattered to him since the moment he stepped off the last transport and started the long journey home, happened in an arrivals hall on a Thursday evening, under fluorescent lights, surrounded by strangers in a hurry to be somewhere else. His daughter saw him first. She was 7 years old, and she was holding the sign, the same construction paper, the same unsteady glitter letters, Daddy, the D slightly larger than the rest because she had run out of space and had to improvise. She dropped it when she saw him. She didn't run so much as launch herself, the way children move when the distance between them and the thing they love becomes suddenly intolerable. He caught her. He held her. That was all. That was the whole of the victory. Not the settlement figure, not the badge on a desk somewhere, not the view count still climbing. Just this, a man and his daughter in an arrivals hall, exactly where they were always supposed to be. He had never once doubted he would get here.